Hey, what up, everybody? It's Moss, coming to you today with my personal pick of the top 10 Wilds of Eldraine cards for Modern. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, why are we doing this now? Spoilers aren't officially done for a little bit. And there's some logic behind this. Between some of the leaks that have made their way out and the official spoilers, realistically, this set isn't the same power level that the last Eldraine set was. Now, keep in mind, this is with COVID, the stopping of organized play for a little bit, and so many other things, the wild bannings that the last Eldraine set brought to us. It makes sense why this is a little bit more of a metered approach from Wizards. No Once Upon a Time, no Veil, no Oko, nothing really meeting that power level. So, realistically, a lot of what could be in this set and could impact Modern is much smaller in comparison to the original Eldraine card pool. But since we're gonna, look at some cards, let's go ahead and have a couple honorable mentions. Now, stuff like Elusive Otter, stuff like Fairy Dream Thief, Siphon Ego, Obira Dreaming Duelist, like, they're all good cards, but they're not Oko, Once Upon a Time, Veil of Summer, powerful. Realistically, all of this is setting up more for Lorwyn, it feels like, than anything else. All of this is setting up for these future sets. It's setting up for a return to Lorwyn where we're going to get just an absolutely ridiculous amount of support for the fairy archetype. So it makes sense, print a couple here, help us get back into thinking about fairies as a legitimate archetype, not only for modern, but now for Pioneer and Standard as well. And realistically, Dream Thief seems like such a good card on its face, but it is weak. Alright, it's a 1-1. It makes you Surveil 1, which is the upside. It's got Evasion, which is great. That Exile Claw is good. However, in a world with Orcish Bowmaster, not great. Obira, again, flash flying, it cares about a particular, creature type, which is great with stuff like Bitter Blossom, which is getting reprinted, but eh. Same with Siphon Ego, Thoughtseize without the 2 damage, perfect. However, it cares about fairies, and if you don't have one, you gotta exile a card from your hand. And Elusive Otter is just so cute. How can you look at little homie and just say no? Alright, and he's got prowess. That's gonna be great for when we go back to Tarkir and we see Swifty all grown up. But here, I'm really just not doing a whole lot. Alright, but to actually get this top 10 list started, we gotta start with Callous Sellsword. Now, previously, this was a much different card on the list for me. However, after going back through a lot of the things that have been spoiled, there's a couple of sets of decks that this really seemed like it would stand out in. The Goryo's Vengeance decks that have started to pop up again in Modern would be a great place for this to go because not only can you just swing in with your hasty legend, but then you can cast the adventure half of Callous Sellsword and just boom, ding your opponent right then and there. Pretty sweet effect. Definitely not something to shake a stick at. And then obviously you've got, the combination of Death Shadow, Dress Down, and now Callous Sellsword just flinging a 13/13 at your opponent after you flash in the Dress Down on your opponent's end step. It's pretty sweet. And this also goes really well in the Kragenwick Cremator decks, where you're dealing potentially 15 or more damage off of a single trigger there. And then you can just burn together, sacrifice the Cremator itself, and boom, get in that last little bit of damage. Overall, this does seem like an upgrade to a couple of small archetypes, gives you some extra finishing power. On its own, the creature half you do have to build around. It's a 2/2, it's a human, and it gets a +1/+1 for each creature that died under your control this turn. Great. This seems like it would be absolutely sweet in a sacrifice synergy. However, Sam and Cat, not the Nickelodeon show, but the great Samwise Gamgee combo deck, it's already winning the turn that both of those things come down with the sacrifice effect. This is not going to win you the game on the spot the same way. So, there are parts of it that work together, especially when you're kind of going all in on a combo, but on its own, the actual body of it, kind of mid. Plus, Unholy Heat, Fatal Push, and Bolt all exist to get rid of this kind of weak 2/2 on the creature side. So, this makes sense for number 10. Number 9 is actually potentially going to help some dead-ish archetypes. All right, Royal Treatment basically does what all of the good hexproof spells that were popular in the sideboards or even in the main boards of decks like Devoted Druid Combo or Infect. This takes those protection spells and adds an extra little bit to them. Now, that's not to say that the Devoted Druid Vizier of Remedies combo deck didn't already have a good protection spell in it, because it did. We just got the good protection spell that not only gives hexproof but gives indestructible for X. Okay, great. Cool. It can pump a creature. That works out fine. I've seen it help a player combo kill, but eh. What Royal Treatment does differently, however, not only does it give you hexproof the turn that you cast it, but then it gives a royal roll to the creature that you cast it on. Now, rolls are a great mechanic out of this new set. They're auras that get put on your creature when you cast them. This royal roll not only gives your creature a +1/+1, but it gives it ward 1 as well. Pair that with some of the legendary pump effects that we've seen out of the Lord of the Rings set, out of Modern Horizons 2, out of a lot of different sets that have been printed recently, and we can start to see a really good combination of things. This card is pumping your creature, it's giving it ward, it's helping it get an extra bit of protection. Your opponent wants to go and solitude your creature? Alright, cool. Royal Treatment, hexproof. But now, in addition to them being targeted, your opponent has to pay an extra 1. They want to try to solitude again after that? Okay, sure. Free spell. Ward trigger. Otherwise, it gets countered. This helps out decks like Infect actually get just a little bit more staying power. One of the biggest things that's been hurting decks like Infect is all of the free removal that's been included in the format since Modern Horizons 2, and now they've got a way to fight against it just a little bit better. Might not bring them back completely, but it's definitely going to push them a little bit higher up. All right, at number 8, we've got Back for Seconds. This is our first card that has the bargain mechanic on it. New mechanic out of the Wilds of Eldraine set. You got to sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token in order to get the bargain effect. And Back for Seconds, on its face, is just a pretty decent card. Okay? Cast it for 3, get 2 creatures from your graveyard back to your hand. Woo! However, if you bargained it, you get to put one of those creatures with mana value 4 or less onto the battlefield instead of putting it in your hand. Sheoldred, 4 mana. You've got lots of good 4 mana or cheaper creatures that you can reanimate for 3 mana with this spell. Now, sure, you're not getting an Archon of Cruelty, but you can discard something to your Underworld cookbook. Maybe your Asmo dies. All right? Your turn. Sacrifice that food token that you made. Get back your Sheoldred. Get back your Asmo. Get back any of those creatures that you've just been ditching. Throw them back on the battlefield. I think that this deck in particular might be able to go off really well with a card from Modern Horizons 1, the one that's basically Sneak and Show attached to a body for planeswalkers, and can start comboing off from there. Now, in other decks, if you want to kind of tool with it a little bit, do kind of a budget reanimator plan, you've got things like Fable of the Mirrorbreaker that help you discard cards into your graveyard. You get a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token. Hey, it's a token that makes treasure tokens when it attacks. It's basically built for this card. So there's a lot of good synergy there, but again, it's not on the same power level as the original Eldraine. This doesn't feel busted in the way that other stuff did. It feels pretty fair, which is why it's this low on the list. But it feels like it's starting to get better. And it does get better. Now, Underworld Cookbook's going to be kind of a big theme here. And just to kind of take an extra hit at the original Eldraine, we now have something that dethrones a previous king, a gluttonous king, a feasting troll king, being replaced by a set of scrawny satyr triplets. Now, here's what you're probably thinking. Okay, well, Feasting Troll King hasn't really seen a lot of play in Modern after Modern Horizons 2 came out. And you're not wrong. The Asmo food decks that used to play it had to invest a lot of time into getting the 3 food to sacrifice in order to bring it back. Now, the 7/6 body is nothing to shake a stick at. That's good. But what if we could do that same effect for the same mana value? But instead of getting 1 body, we get 3. Now, sure, we're not sacrificing food tokens. We're discarding gruff triplets to our Underworld cookbook. And then we are persisting it, getting it out of the graveyard. And the reason why that is so good is because it's not going to enter as a token. So we get 2 token copies of it. But Moss, it's going to be a 2/2. That's fine. That's totally okay. Let gruff triplets die. Let your opponent unholy heat it. You still got 2 extra bodies, and when it dies, you put a number of 1/1 counters on the other gruff triplets equal to the power of the one that just died. So, ooh, your 2/2 just died, but now you're left with 2 5/5s with trample. And if one of those 5/5s die, oh, your opponent has an unholy heat because they can't push it. because it's got the same characteristics. If they kill the other one, then you're left with a 10/10. And since you have Persist and you're definitely not leaving home without 4 copies of it in your deck, you just get to keep on going crazy with the number of big old tokens and big old triplets that you're making for days. So, definitely a good card, and it's starting to push that power level up. So, we can see where Wilds of Eldraine is definitely trying to carry on in some of the aspects of its predecessor. Maybe not completely busted, but we're starting to see a little bit more value in it now. And that value really starts to come out once we reach the end. Now, this isn't the end of the video by any means. And in fact, since it's not the end of the video, you should go ahead and just tap that little subscribe button for us, like this video. It definitely helps the algorithm and definitely helps us out, lets us know the type of content that you guys want to see more of. But the end here is a great instant speed counterspell. Okay, 4 mana value, and it just lets you exile a creature or a planeswalker. Okay, well, cool. You get to instant speed exile. So what? Here's the big thing. Teferi Time Raveler. Now, yes, if this is on the battlefield, if Teferi's out there, you're not casting the end at instant speed. I'm well aware of this. You're well aware of this. However, you take it out of your opponent's graveyard, their hand, their library. You surgical extraction your opponent for 2 mana potentially if you've got 5 or less life. Now, this is definitely kind of precarious in Modern. 5 life, you're just 2 bolts away from dying. But there are certain decks that like to get that low real quick. Death Shadow. You know what Death Shadow has a hard time fighting against? Solitude. They have a hard time fighting against Teferi Time Raveler. There's a lot of cards that they really do not have a fun time playing against. And a lot of those creatures, a lot of those planeswalkers, those threats fall in the face of the end. Because it'll spell the end of your opponent in the beginning of your victory story. All right, but at number 5, we've got Beseech the Mirror. Now, if you're chronically online on the MTG Twitterverse, you've probably seen people tagging Aspiring Spike talking about this exact card because it goes absolutely bonkers in the Cabal Coffers deck that he has really popularized. Now, for those of you that don't know what Cabal Coffers does, tap 2 and you add a swamp or you add a black mana for each swamp you control. Pair that with Urborg and boom, tons of mana. Beseech the Mirror lets you tutor any particular card and you exile it face down. Now, Beseech the Mirror has that bargain effect on it. So you sacrifice an artifact, you sacrifice an enchantment, you sacrifice a token. Now, Spike's deck doesn't necessarily have a whole lot of artifacts in the main board, besides the One Ring. And this is where things get interesting. You can do this and help get more copies of the One Ring out of your deck. If you bargain a One Ring that has a lot of burden counters on it to stop you from dying to your own One Ring, Beseech the Mirror, bargain it, get another One Ring, cast it for free, get that protection, get more card draw, and save yourself for a potential game-winning situation. Or Beseech the Mirror into Sheoldred, or Beseech the Mirror into any number of 4 mana value or less spells that could be particularly valuable to you. There's lots of game-winning combos that can definitely be made with this card. Pairing that with Cabal Coffers is going to be an easy win for anybody that wants to try this out for themselves. And it makes a lot of sense as we're going up that you can start to see a lot more of the value in these things. Now, number 4, we're in the top half. So obviously the power level has to be going up. Beseech the Mirror does a whole lot, but what says power like Simic nonsense? Now, you guys are definitely familiar with Gilded Goose from the last set. It's a mana dork, made a food token. Sweet. Right around the same time that came out, Hydroid Krasis came out. When you cast it, gain half X life, draw half X cards, and you round down. It's got Flample. Alright, Flying, Trample, throw a bunch of 1/1 counters on it. Card was a house in Standard. It's pretty good in modern sideboards and decks like Amulet Titan. The Goose Mother, however, takes this same formula. And while it doesn't do mythic things the way that Hydroid Krasis did, in being a rare, this opens up a lot of really good design space. It doesn't have to do everything when it enters, but it does enough to allow it to have some incredible synergies with a lot of different cards. In particular, Sarenth Seal Seeker. Steel Seeker? Yes, Steel Seeker. All right. It's going to let you create a lot of food tokens, round it up, and you get to start surveilling cards off the top of your deck. Or if they're lands, throw them in your hand. Cool. With Academy Manufactor, you make a food, you make clue, you make treasure. And you do that for each instance of that. It goes pretty hard with cards like Lonus, which are definitely being played in those same Academy Manufactor shells. Take this into the Sultai direction, play Time Sieve, and Goose Mother enters with all these counters on it. You get an extra turn. When you attack, you can sacrifice food, draw extra cards, potentially go off more with your Academy Manufactor, your Lonus, so many other things. This card lends itself to game-breaking Simic strategies that are just already crazily destructive. So you know that you're going to have a honking good time with this card. And bad goose puns aside, now we get to talk about what happens when there are too many cooks in the kitchen. They wind up in Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Now, this artifact is insane. However, it's only insane in Modern. And the reason why I say it's insane only in Modern is because where Pioneer and Standard are about to start getting a lot of creatures with activated abilities, none of them have the same particular power level as established Modern ones. When you activate Agatha's Soul Cauldron, you exile a card from a graveyard. And when you exile a creature card this way, put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control. Well, ooh, that sounds good, Moss. However, this is where it gets better. Now, all of your creatures with those 1/1 counters have all the activated abilities of the cards, all of the cards exiled with the Soul Cauldron. Yawgmoth has an activated ability. Grist, when it's in the graveyard, when it is not on the battlefield, it counts as a creature. When Arcbound Ravager's in the graveyard, you get its ability. When Walking Ballista's in the graveyard, you get its ability when they are all sucked up and turned into this delicious, soulful brew. Yawgmoth decks are immediately powered up with this. Your Yawgmoth dies, oh no, it bit the dust, whatever will you do? How about you just turn all of your creatures into Yawgmoth? Your undying creatures instantly get to become Yawgmoth effects. You play this in a Hardened Scales shell, and then suddenly, every single one of your creatures becomes an Arcbound Ravager. Sacrifice, add those counters. They all suddenly become Walking Ballistas. Pew, pew, pew. Guns blazing, shoot down your opponent's board. You turn all of your creatures into Grist. Nothing but insect tokens everywhere. Now, sure, you maybe have to activate your stuff twice in order to get that removal effect on the third turn with Agatha's Soul Cauldron on the board. But guess what? If you get to that point, you are already in a winning position. And now you get free counter spells, extra creatures on the board. There is nothing that you cannot do with Agatha's Soul Cauldron and all of these creatures with their activated abilities. We might not be at original Eldraine levels of power, but the spice is just right in this brew. At number 2, we have Not Dead After All, because, boy, what better thematic way to bring your creatures back from the dead than with this? Okay? Everybody on Twitter already knew this. Everyone who's been active in the modern scene already knew this. This card was basically an automatic inclusion in any evoke deck. Alright? Everybody knew that this card would be there because it's another Feign Death. It's another Undying Malice effect. Woo! However, unlike Feign Death, unlike Undying Malice, not only do you get to bring your creature back from the dead, but now they're wicked. So now you have Wicked Grief and Wicked Fury. Which, okay, sure, the role and the goofy name aside, it's actually pretty sweet. Because now, whenever your creature dies, your opponent's going to lose an extra life. So now, when they are forced to remove your creatures, they're just taking that little bit of extra damage on top of everything else. And again, what is dead may never die, but it comes back harder and stronger. And to top it all off, the hardest thing on our list, our number 1 card, is a cookie that will not crumble. We're coming in with Sir Ginger the Meal Ender as our number 1 pick. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, the goofy card from the original Eldraine trailer. Why is this a viable modern card? Sir Ginger just goes insane in so many decks. Now, given it only gets trample, hexproof, and haste as long as an opponent controls a planeswalker. Okay, sure. That can be a little difficult. Except when there's Wrenn and 6 that comes down on turn 2 regularly. Except when there's Teferi in the format. And so many other good planeswalkers that see fringe play. Sir Ginger's going to get hexproof when they're on the battlefield. Okay, fine. Why else would this card be good? Whenever another artifact you control is put into the graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on Sir Ginger and scry 1. Alright, this card goes from 0 to "You're a monster!" in just 0 seconds flat with cards like Asmo and all of the food tokens. Okay, it goes crazy when you start sacrificing treasures. It goes crazy when clues start going, when food starts being cracked left and right. Card's gonna go hard. God forbid this is in like any hardened scales deck. Just boom, boom, boom. Big, big, big. And you get to scry each time these artifacts go flying. If an opponent decides to cast an EE on 1 or an EE on 0, when you're playing Hammer Time and you slam this on there, the cookie's not going to crumble. Your opponent will. Because the moment they crack that, Genji explodes. Genji becomes all powerful, all consuming. Garruk, the Primal Hunter, is about to become the hunted when this thing hits the battlefield. Because she's going in and she's just ganking them. Throw a hammer on her. She's going to go crazy. Sarent Steelseeker, again, is just going to do its thing. Genji's going to hit the field. All the food's going to hit the field. All the treasure's going to hit the field. All the equipment's going to hit the field. Boom, boom, boom. Triggers on triggers on triggers. And let's not forget the fact that she's a food knight. If you get into a sticky situation, Sir Ginger's going to gain you some life. That's some real soul food right there. And sure, maybe this could be a problem going into something like an Orcish Bowmaster, but we know that she ain't going out like that. But that's our top 10 for Wilds of Eldraine in Modern. Let us know in the comments what you guys think of our top 10 list. Are there any cards that you think that we're leaving out? Any cards that are going to be spoiled soon that you feel like are maybe deserving of a higher spot? Maybe you got a cool deck list idea around things like Sir Ginger the Meal Ender and a number of other cards. Show them off to us. Show them to us on Twitter, Instagram, anywhere you find us. But until next time, peace.